Today, I'll be giving you guys a buyer's guide on the Sony X90K. So smack a like on this video because we're going to dive right in without wasting any of your time. Now, at the time of shooting this video, as of October 5th, 2022, it's got a pretty good price point. And I mean, like 75 inches will run you $16.98. That's not bad. Now, if you want something a little bit smaller, like a 55-inch, that's going to be sub $1,000 at $998, and then the 65-inch will run you $1198. So the pricing is pretty good. Now, one of the things that probably have enticed a lot of people to this particular product is that this is Sony's AI television, their XR cognitive processor. They're boasting things like contrast booster times 10. I mean, really, they try to make it seem like this is just the perfect fit for PlayStation 5 and a bunch of other things, but there are some things that we have to kind of keep in mind. When you hear things like, their XR cognitive processor, to be very fair, it is not more advanced than what they've done in years prior, and I've compared older televisions as far back as 2017 to see just how the new chip stacks up, and honestly, the older chips did better in a lot of areas. So I wouldn't really get hung up on this being the reason you buy it. So like if you're like, okay, I'm in the market, I need a television, I like Sony, I see they got a cognitive processor, let me jump on it for that reason. Don't do it, because it doesn't actually replicate what we see with the human eye. And honestly speaking, prior processors were in a very similar playing field. Now, they also talk about Triluminous Pro this year. Don't be fooled by that. I mean, I know it can seem like, they're trying to make it look more like a quantum dot television or something more QLED-esque, but truthfully speaking, they still are not using quantum dots. So again, it's going to have a disadvantage going up against a QLED in a similar price point or even in a lower price point. So, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like you can do a lot better, if I'm being very honest with you, for the money. Now, again, more gimmicky things. That contrast booster times 10 that I'm talking about, it really just finds highlights and makes them bright. But honestly speaking, a really bright TV will make the highlights bright anyway. So I wouldn't really get bogged down by like all of that nonsense. Now, I think the reason why I would probably come down a little bit harder on the highlights is because this is, again, it's a 900 series Sony. Now, obviously, within the last couple of years, rebranded to the 90 series, and the X90K is under 1,000 nits. And in today's market, that's really unacceptable, considering for literally $550, you can find TCLs and Hisense TVs that give you way more brightness, and they have actual quantum dots. So the idea when you go into these retail stores and there's this grand bias against established brands that have, notoriety, you immediately recognize the insignia or the badge on the product. It's kind of what they play on to get the money. And I think sure, TCL and Hisense don't have the most notoriety in the United States, for example, but they give the most for the money. And I think that's where you kind of have to start maybe broadening your horizons a little bit if you're looking for the best bang for the buck, because there's no denying that the deal is there. The price point is there. But if we're being fair, my personal recommendation were to look around, find the Hisense U8H. It's the better TV for the money. Just bar none. It is the closest LED I've seen in years to an OLED. And it really blows my mind. Now, of course, that's only when we talk about sitting on axis, but off axis, not so much. Off axis, not so much, because we don't want a situation where, again, you're expecting OLED picture quality off angle for any VA type panel. And again, in English, just anytime you have LEDs, a rule of thumb, typically, if it's not IPS, you're going to have some sort of issues when you're trying to do off-angle viewing. And then, of course, that's where OLED steps in and becomes better. But I think one of the areas that really disappointed me the most with this TV, the Sony X90K, has terrible local dimming. So what it ends up doing is it darkens some things, but like if there's a bright element, like, a menu in a video game, subtitles on a campfire scene, you're going to see a lot of gray-black and a lot of hazing, and it is not pretty. It's pretty bad. And honestly, it performs lower than a lot of budget TVs now, again, at that $550 to like $650 price range for the same exact size. And I mean, honestly, for that, it's really hard to recommend this product. Having done this for years and stuff like that, I just don't see that particular value. Now, again, it's not to say like everything about this TV is just like a total zero. It's not to say like it's IPS gray black, but you do have moments where the blooming, because it has local dimming, becomes more distracting, I would say, is the problem. And you can notice it more prevalently. Again, I'm not kidding. Like campfire scenes on this TV, forget about it. You're going to notice it more and more, and it's going to be really like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now, another really massive problem is that they don't really have anti-glare technology. A lot of the higher end models of televisions, even at this price range, really do tend to offer some sort of anti-reflective coating on the screen, where this is just a matte finish screen, but it really reflects light like nobody's business. It's almost a mirror. It's really bad. If there's a light in your room, it's going to pick it up relatively easily, and I think that's something that you should keep in mind. Another thing is Sony is known for like lens to living room performance, being accurate and all that stuff, but to sell that performance in something like maybe their Master Series or something a little bit more expensive, they do tend to ship with higher delta errors, for my more technical guys, just out of the box, than what you would find on, again, a different model that costs a little bit more money. So in terms of delta error, I found that you have a delta error higher than 3. So it's not below that threshold. You're going to see some sort of inaccuracies. And honestly, for me, the one thing that I noticed immediately with this particular Sony, everybody was very pale. Everything was very hazy. I just never really got it to look good. And it doesn't have any real latent potential. So like, yes, to a computer, you can get it reference accurate. But what I always like to talk about on this channel is, you know, the technical accuracy that a computer can see, seeing things that, again, humans can't pick up on, versus perceptible accuracy, what we see and how we perceive colors in the world. The Sony's colors are just ugly, and you're going to have to know how to restore them. And so, again, I do the best I can to try to help people out with a service for $5 to do that for you. So that way you're not paying another $500 out to hire a calibrator just to do one picture setting and then try to a la carte you for everything else. I try to make it as affordable as possible. So if you're interested in that type of thing, definitely join and you snag my settings. But it's not something that is readily known. Like, these TVs typically don't look the best, even though they're, yes, you're buying a Sony. Yes, they have a big name behind them and a lot of supporters, a lot of positive reviews, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to be a slam dunk product. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people kind of confuse when they start buying luxury name brand products or items in general. So just keep that in mind. Now, again, we're not saying that this is all bad. One of the things that this does really well is, well, simply put, it's great at upscaling. I mean, Sony's typically do a great job of that. Now, in terms of color coverage, you have 95% coverage of the DCI-P3, and you have 79% of BT 2020. Now, that is not very high at all. I don't know if you guys know this, but like right now, it's pretty much normal to have anywhere from like 98 to 99% coverage of the DCI-P3. And for this to be hitting at like 95%, that's like 2016 behavior as far as what we saw out of our TVs at the time. To be able to do that nowadays is kind of unacceptable. And actually, no, you can actually go as far back as 2015, I believe, and there are TVs that can hit 95% of the DCI-P3 color coverage and, you know, a similar level of the BT 2020. And to see this again on a Sony of all things is just really unacceptable. So I think, again, if you're somebody who goes into it expecting like grand color, grand accuracy, and things like that, you're going to be disappointed. Another area you are going to be disappointed is motion. Sony, for whatever reason, over the last few years have been getting worse with motion artifacts when you turn on motion processing to try to smooth out the jittery nature or the juddery nature, stuttery nature of your image. If you turn it off, it's just going to be like, it's going to look like stop motion almost, but like a really bad stop motion. It's just very jittery, very choppy. And I just don't know that Sony has the right answer to fixing this anytime soon, because nobody really seems to want to call out a big brand with a name behind them and a lot of social media influencers supporting them and things like that. So these problems go widely unnoticed and they never really get fixed. And kind of the similar theme with things being unfixed, Sony is notorious for really bad input lag. And I'm sorry, but right now this is pushing almost 18 milliseconds of input lag in 1080-60, which is terrible. Like, in today's market, we have TVs that hit 14 milliseconds that hell, I've seen it as low as like 9 milliseconds on things like some Vizios hit that. And again, these TVs are like in the $600, $700 price range. This is $1,100 for just a 55-inch. And I think that's disgusting that it has higher levels of input lag. And then the other thing that's unacceptable is like you've got two HDMI 2.1 ports that support the full bandwidth. But outside of that, similarly to every single Sony, you're kind of done after that. And it's really unfortunate because that means it limits your ability to use this to every extent that you would want. And that's just my thing. Now, it is nice that they ship with the same remote that you can find on, TVs like the Sony, the A80K, which is their OLED model. It's nice to see the same remote, but it's kind of cheap and generic. It's not backlit. I think at this price point, it wouldn't kill you to throw LEDs in there. What are LEDs like to produce? Like what, 25 cents? Not even, And especially ones that small, I really don't see the logic behind trying to gate a feature like that, but that's what they do. In terms of the design, I actually really love the design of the television. I think it does a brilliant job. It looks fantastic. It shows a whole lot of promise in it, and it looks like a higher end TV, even though it's made out of cheap plastic. But I do enjoy the design and stuff like that. But I don't know, man. It just, Sony with their direction with this particular TV, it kind of makes it hard to recommend because with so many competitive options on the market, again, not even just from this year, but also from last year, because I can't safely say, right, if there's an X80J on the market, right, that you should buy this X90K or X90K on the market, or X90J on the market from last year, that you should buy this year's X90K. Honestly speaking, I can't say that because it's really about the same ballpark of disappointment that you're going to find in terms of all the areas you don't like and all the areas you like. It's, again, extremely similar. Color performance, motion performance. There's nothing about this TV that screams exceptional or like a marked improvement over last year's model. Usually we'd like to see some improvement, but this is like an iPhone 14 to iPhone 13 kind of behavior, right? Like there's no real improvement going on here, but they're just calling it a new product to just get money and appease shareholders. That's really the only thing I can tell you about this TV to kind of warn you ahead of time to curve those expectations to reality for maybe some people that maybe saw a bunch of good reviews on Amazon, or you're watching a bunch of cherry-picked YouTubers like Glow and Give It Favor and all that stuff. Like, I mean, believe what you need to, but I'm telling you, it's not really as great as some people try to make it seem. And we've seen, even on sites like Amazon, you really have to be careful trusting 5-star reviews because they've gotten in trouble before for deleting negative reviews, and it actually starts making news for certain products. And so if you want to look into that, you can see that they do have a history of deleting negative reviews. So I would be wary about Amazon reviews in general anyway and using that to make a decision. But honestly speaking, if you're talking about the UI and what it offers, it's so similar to what they've been offering last year. Like, honestly, there's nothing new. No new features. It's literally all the same stuff that you were sold last year, brought back this year. Maybe they try to move the names around a little bit to be fancy, but really, you're not getting anything really different. So if you really need a Sony or really want a Sony, or it's all you really can get in your region, then I would say try to find a deal on last year's model, because this year, there's not enough of an improvement at all. I mean, really going back to the iPhone 14 comparison, like they've not tried. And so I think to not tell you that would be a disservice to you. Again, some decent alternatives. I say look at, a Hisense U8H this year. If you can find them, a TCL R646 from last year, a TCL S546 from last year would be fantastic. But this isn't ideal. And I think if you're going the route of spending even $1,100 at this point, another reason why it's really a tough sell is because right now you can get an LG OLED and be good as far as that. Like, who wouldn't want an OLED over this TV? I couldn't say. Blacks are deeper, colors are significantly better with wider color coverage on the LG B2, and it's cheaper at, like, I believe currently right now it's $998 for a 55-inch. So, I mean, really, it's kind of in the same ballpark, and for that, you might as well just go with OLED. So, I don't know. My advice to you guys would probably be to do that if you wanted something a little bit more high-end or from one of the quotation mark established brands, like maybe you didn't want to give Hisense or TCL a chance. But really, this is not a product that I think anyone would be happy with. outside of people who have very, very low expectations, but they just want a Sony and they want a Sony in a big size. Because I think the only real thing this offers is that it gives you some of the similar current Sony features, but it does it in a bigger size up to like 75 inches going for like $1,600, $1,700. Great, you don't spend a whole lot of money, and then you have bragging rights. You can go to your friends and say, hey, look, I've got a 75-inch Sony X90 series television, I'm the hot shit, whatever. You can do whatever and brag about whatever, but it's honestly speaking just not that great of a television as far as everyday usage and experience. So if this isn't a TV that you're using to keep up with the Jones, I highly recommend that you maybe look elsewhere. If you have questions about this particular product, ask me down below. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. The #1 brand in honesty. And until the next video, I'll see you guys later.